Since most of the works of L. Frank Baum are considered literary fairy tales, I thought I'd do one more over an Oz book in the series and a movie. So I'm going to be talking about Ozma of Oz and the movie Return to Oz from 1985, which is mostly based on Ozma. And yes, it is L. Frank Baum. I've always known that since I first fell in love with Wicked in 2003 when it came out. That's where Elphaba came from, L. Frank Baum. I said it wrong in my last video. We all make mistakes. Sorry. As many of you already know, L. Frank Baum wrote 14 full-length Oz books, and the movie that we're all familiar with and the story that Wicked is based off of is the first one, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. The second book in the series is called The Marvelous Land of Oz, and it actually doesn't have Dorothy in it. The protagonist is a young boy named Tip. He's from Oz, escapes this evil witch who's his guardian, and meets a few characters that are going to be in Return to Oz. Jack Pumpkinhead, the Gump brought to life by the Powder of Life. The next time we see Dorothy again is in Ozma of Oz, the third book in the series, and that's where Disney decided to make a sequel. Return to Oz is a dark fantasy film, and it's so fascinating for a bunch of reasons. It stars Fairuza Balk in her first film role. Later she would be Nancy in The Craft and Vicky Valancourt in Waterboy. This movie is considered an unofficial sequel to the 1939 MGM The Wizard of Oz. However, it is truer to the books than the 1939 movie. First of all, that Dorothy is much younger, and they get a lot of the really dark, twisted stuff correct because these books are actually pretty twisted. One of the darkest parts of this movie is not taken from L. Frank Baum. The story is set in 1899 Kansas, and Dorothy's aunt and uncle think she is crazy because she can't sleep and she keeps talking about this magical place called Oz she went to, and so they decide to commit her to a sanatorium and get her electroshock therapy. This is the machine that they're trying to hook her up to, and in very 1939 MGM fashion, this machine and how it almost looks like a face is something that will be mirrored when she returns to Oz. Also, one of the women who are tying her up to do the electroshock therapy to her is going to be a character in Oz too, like the 1939 film. But before they strap Dorothy down, she has a vision where she sees this girl in a mirror, and the girl basically tells her, these people are only going to mess you up, they're dangerous, and so she tries to escape. But just when they're about to do it, a lightning storm causes all the electricity to go out, and they can't do it. A mysterious girl helps Dorothy escape, and they run out into this storm and are kind of washed away in this river. Now, we don't see if and where the other girl resurfaces, but Dorothy resurfaces with one of her chickens named Billina, who was in the fray and could not talk in Kansas, but can now talk in Oz. In the book Ozma of Oz, there is no electroshock therapy. The way that she gets there, she's going with her uncle to Australia, and there's a big shipwreck, and then she washes up in Oz that way. She washes up in the Deadly Desert, which is kind of hinted at in Wicked. In the books of Oz, all of Oz is surrounded by this deadly desert that makes it impossible to get in and out of the land of Oz because there are other lands, which we'll get to. Like, if you touch the sand, you just turn to sand and you die. So Dorothy knows this, and she and Billina hop on some stones to get out of the desert. In the book, she actually ends up in a whole other land called the Land of Ev, E-V. So this whole thing takes place in the world of Oz, but not in Oz. But they changed that for the movie, and they have her go to the Emerald City. And so instead of Ev, the Emerald City has changed, and the yellow brick road's all broken up, and all of the people are frozen marble statues, including the Tin Man and the lion. They have been frozen like Medusa style. The creatures that are around are these terrifying creatures called wheelers, which are basically like people, but with wheels for hands and feet, and they wheel around and are terrifying beyond description if you ever see the movie, and they go after Dorothy. They hide in this vault, and they find this cool character named Tick-Tock. He's just sitting there, but then Dorothy figures out he has a wind-up thing in the back. She winds him up, and he is a talking automaton, and interestingly is one of the first talking human intelligence, human emotion automaton in literature. Fun fact, in the original The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the Scarecrow gets left to be King of Oz when the wizard leaves. And so she's like, where's the Scarecrow? And he's like, the Scarecrow told me to wait here for you, that you would come and find me and that you would help me rescue everyone. The whole place has been taken over by two people, Princess Mombi, the Wheelers work for her, and the Gnome King, gnome spelled N-O-M-E, not with a G. He has kidnapped the Scarecrow. So Mombi captures all of them, and she shows Dorothy this whole room that has a bunch of detachable heads. Like all these real women's heads are on the shelf, and she just takes it off and puts on a new head every day. The head she wears most of the time is that woman from the electroshock place. But anyway, she tells Dorothy she wants her head, but Dorothy's still too young, so she wants to let her mature before she takes her head, and locks Dorothy and TikTok and Billina up in this attic. In the attic, they meet this guy, Jack Pumpkinhead, who is delightful and has been brought to life by this powder of life that they then use to create a creature called the Gump that's basically a couch with some palm leaf wings and a mounted moose head. They bring him to life. So he helps them escape, and then they fly to the cave of the Gnome King to try and rescue the Scarecrow. So the Gnome King, who first is just a face in the rock, but then slowly gets more and more anthropomorphic, tells them he has turned the Scarecrow into an ornament, and they can go in this room full of ornaments and touch whichever one they think is him, and if they're right, they get him, and if they're wrong, they get turned into an ornament too. There's also a significant part where he says that he has her ruby slippers, and they had to pay a lot of money to have the right to the ruby slippers because that's an MGM creation. As you probably know, there's silver slippers in the book, but Disney really wanted that original idea. Anyway, he gives her a chance to go home with the slippers, but she says no, she's going to rescue her friends. So everyone goes in and they all get turned into ornaments instead of picking the right one. And then finally it's Dorothy's turn. He touches this green gem, it turns into the Scarecrow. She saved him. And then she realizes all of her friends are probably also green. So they touch everything green, they bring everyone back to life, and they hurry to escape. Now the Gnome King gets giant and tries to eat all of them with his big rock mouth. And this is true in the book. Billina starts laying an egg, and he's terrified of eggs. Like, he just has this terror of eggs, and so he, flings them away. But the egg still drops in his mouth, and it poisons him, and he dies, and the whole place collapses, but they escape just in time, and Dorothy got her ruby slippers back. Also, a bunch of the Wheelers died trying to pursue Dorothy and them as they flew across the deadly desert in the Gump, but the rest went back to Mombi and told her what happened. She comes to the Gnome King while he's doing the ornament test on everyone, and they'd been in cahoots, but he imprisons her for letting Dorothy escape, and so she's in a cage when everything collapses when he dies, and presumably dies too. So they get back and everyone is unmarbled and free, and there's a huge celebration, and then it turns out Mombi had imprisoned this girl, Ozma of Oz, who's the rightful ruler of Oz and should have been from the start, in mirrors inside the palace. And she's also the same girl who spoke to Dorothy at the sanatorium and helped her escape. And so they free her, and she ascends to the throne and becomes the rightful ruler, and the Scarecrow's cool with it because he never really wanted to rule anyway. He gives Dorothy her ruby slippers and says, hey, you can use these to come back whenever you want to now. You don't have to wait for there to be a big storm. And she clicks her heels and goes home. She washes up on the river shore, and her Auntie Em and uncle are like, we're so sorry we sent you to that sanatorium. Don't worry, the lightning made it burn down and everyone inside died except the nurse who's gone to jail because I guess they were doing illegal experiments. And she watches the nurse who looks like Mombi go away, imprisoned. Later, she sees Ozma and Billina, who decided to stay in Oz. I mean, I'd stay where I had the power of speech as well. She sees them in a mirror, and she's about to call for Auntie Em to prove she was right, but Ozma's like, shh, keep it a secret, and then you can come back someday. So she decides, I'm just going to keep it a secret now so I don't get electroshock therapy again, and goes out to play with Toto. In the book Ozma of Oz, she uses a magic belt instead of her ruby slippers to travel that they stole from the Gnome King, and she just takes herself to Australia where she was supposed to be with her uncle, so he thought she died on the ship, but she's like, no, I'm here, we can still have our Australian trip. Also, if Ozma of Oz sounds familiar and you've watched the show You on Netflix, it's because it's part of season 1. Joe steals a copy of it from Peach, because it's rare and stuff. Hope you enjoyed the journey through Return to Oz / Ozma of Oz. I'll probably be back to my regularly scheduled programming with some German fairy tales next time. Check out my podcast, Folktales and Fairy Lore. My most recent episode is about Sleeping Beauty with my sister, and it's great. And my book Dust Spells, a reimagining of the 12 Dancing Princesses.